UKIP says they're different. I mean, the Brexit Party says they're different. I mean, the Reform Party says they're different. Clean, professional, changed. But what if the truth is nothing's changed at all? Today, we're exposing the candidates they've selected and the shocking posts they've shared. In 2014, Have I Got News For You had a special episode called
Fruitcakes and Loonies.
And Loonies, and
Yes.
worse.
The premise was to figure out whether or not it was a fruitcake or a loony from the UKIP party making horrific statements. This UKIP candidate, John Sullivan, wrote this.
Regular physical exercise releases boys' tensions and thus avoided homosexuality. Which is quite right, Mr. Sullivan, and that's why you'll never see a gay man down the gym.
This is UKIP party treasurer Stuart Wheeler, one of their biggest donors.
Women had no place in the boardroom and couldn't compete with men at sports, even when they're not physically disadvantaged. He said, chess, bridge, poker, women come absolutely nowhere. I think that just has to be borne in mind.
And whilst Nigel sat there chuckling at all these really funny comments, Rob Fraser was brought up, who was neither a fruitcake or a loony.
He said, the Romanians, they'll stick a knife in you as soon as look at you.
All anyone wants to talk about are the idiots in UKIP. There's never a conversation about the idiots in the Labour Party, the 5 councillors who've just resigned on racism charges in Middlesbrough.
To be honest, I never hear you say anything else when you're questioned about your own party.
And I'll add, for the next 10 years, that is all he ever says. What about everyone else?
And the problem is, we're not having a debate about the European Union.
But people aren't worried that
We're
the
not
Labour
having a
Party or
debate.
the Conservative Party is spreading racist propaganda.
Well, why
People
have the Conservative Party got a former BNP activist standing for them in Lincolnshire? Will you ask the Conservative
Of course I
Party?
will, absolutely.
No, but you won't, you see, because
Well,
nobody
now
ever
you're calling
does.
me a liar. Of
But
course,
nobody ever
of course I will.
does
But I've
ask those
answered your
questions.
question. The reason
Anyway.
why it doesn't possess the same urgency as the UKIP conversation does is A, the question of quantity. There is simply not the avalanche of bigotry emerging from other
Oh, yes,
parties
there
that
is.
emerges from yours.
Oh, yes, there
and
is.
B, perhaps more pertinently for you then, there is not a fear abroad afoot. There is not a fear in the country. The opinion polls do not report significant swathes of the nation who are fearful, possibly wrongly, Nigel, that your party represents deeply divisive and racist ideas. If you'd let me finish.
You're starting to see a bit of a pattern within the party and its issues that always seem to follow Nigel, and I will be coming up to the modern era shortly. Just have a listen to how bad this goes for Nigel.
You've mentioned your discomfort at listening to foreign languages on a train recently.
I made the point that I got on a train and went for several stops, and there were a lot of people around me and no one spoke English. And I thought, this is... I didn't say I didn't object to it. I felt slightly uncomfortable. And I think, actually, isn't that the problem? Isn't this, of all the countries in Europe, the most accepting, the most tolerant?
You said, I don't feel very comfortable in that situation. You did say you had a problem.
I didn't feel comfortable, no.
Yes. Your wife is a German speaker.
Well, my children are too, yeah.
Does that make you feel uncomfortable?
No, because they can speak English, and the whole point about
How do you know those people couldn't?
Well, maybe they could, but I got the distinct feeling that it certainly wasn't their language of choice. And if you look at the primary school situation in the East End of London, where you've now got schools where a majority don't speak English, doesn't that say to us...
No, you've got
doesn't
schools...
that say to us that what we want is a sensible, balanced immigration policy where we want people with skills to come into Britain, but we also want integration in society.
Of course we do. And the schools you refer to, the pupils you refer to, are registered and recorded as having English as a second language. They're not registered and recorded as not being able to speak English. That's precisely that sort of...
And some of both.
Well, yes, but no one's counted them, so your own children would fit into that category.
Well, hopefully, lots of people can speak different languages, but the point I'm making is, do we want to live in an integrated society?
No, forgive me. The point you're making is that schools in the East End are full of children who can't speak English. I just want you to recognise that's not true, what you just said.
Come from
the
homes.
children who are typified as speaking English as a second language would include your own daughters. Their mother tongue being German.
They come from homes where English is most definitely not the first language, and in too many cases is not the language at all. Now look,
but no one's counted how many people are in the second category.
And it would be a very helpful and useful thing if they did, and perhaps we'd be even more surprised and even more shocked. But the argument...
Or perhaps we'd realise that most bilingual children in this country are children like yours.
Well, let's turn it around the other way, shall we?
Yes, let's.
Yes, let's point out that Britain is a union. It is not one country, it's made up of several countries. And a lot of those countries speak different languages, such as Wales, they speak Welsh. Does that mean that when we're all in Wales that we should no longer speak English? Because according to Nigel, that's the way forward. Everyone that goes to Wales now automatically needs to speak Welsh. Maybe Scots or Scottish Gaelic in Scotland. Maybe we should extend that to Cornwall, and when we turn up we can only speak Cornish. Literally, what in fuck is Nigel talking about? He is absolutely mental, and you're starting to see this pattern that keeps on occurring with Nigel. Whenever he goes on these shows, he starts spouting racist nonsense. And he's been doing it for over 10 years.
But what the caller asked you was why so many people think you're racist.
Yeah, well, I think, yes, we've had our idiots.
And part of the answer would be you talk about children who can't speak English as a first language without mentioning it includes your own children.
I mean, what is racism? Is racism between racism? And I was talking about.
Don't you know? How can you say you're not something if you don't know what it is?
I mean, is race about colour? Is race about race, or is it about nationality? I made a comment there that wasn't intended to say any more, that I felt uncomfortable about the rate and pace of change and numbers of people.
No, you felt uncomfortable about people speaking foreign languages, despite the fact that presumably your own wife does when she phones home to Germany.
Yeah, I don't suppose she speaks it on the train, That's
why
the point
not?
I make.
Is she not allowed to? Can't she speak German wherever she wants?
Are Welsh people not allowed to speak Welsh in England? Are we not allowed to speak Gaelic, Cornish, or even Gibraltarian or Spanish? If I get a phone call from a friend in Brazil, do I have to go and hide in the toilet so Nigel doesn't get offended by my Portuguese? Do all tourists have to speak English only in order to be able to enter the country? What is Nigel talking about? And bear this all in mind, because I'm going to show you what his modern group of selected candidates who are meant to be really well vetted have been saying on social media. But also remember what his candidates said about Romanians.
And what about the line about we're not wanting to live next door to Romanians? It's perfectly acceptable for people
I didn't say
not
that.
to
I was asked if a group of Romanian men moved in next door to you, would you be concerned?
What about if a group of German children did? What's the difference?
The difference, and you know what the difference is.
No, I honestly don't. This is, I think, where the disconnect is between your position and mine. What is the difference?
We want an immigration policy based on controlling not just quantity but quality as well. And we have a problem that and unfortunately, those communist countries which I've visited, and I've visited the Roma encampments, and I've seen the real poverty that people live in, and we talk about exclusion in society. Go and see, since the fall of communism, what has happened to the Roma communities in those countries. They don't get jobs, they get nowhere to live, and they have been forced, in many cases, to a life of crime. And what has happened with an open door is it's been an open invitation for the traffickers. Now, we all know this is going on.
Okay.
The Metropolitan Police
Trafficking is a crime, of course.
Trafficking is a crime.
And trafficked people are victims of crime.
Yes, and the Metropolitan Police have produced their crime statistics, and they're eye-watering, and I'm saying, let's get a grip on it.
I know you're saying that about Romanians, but you gloss so smoothly and so slickly demonising Romanians and demonising Germans.
I'm not demonising anybody.
You just asked you a question about Romanians and you started talking about people traffickers.
I'm demonising.
But if you think it ended there, you're sadly mistaken. UKIP candidates had comments about Bongo Land, a councillor was sacked over using the N-word, as well as homophobic slurs.
Other people will be mortified that I dare to talk about it. There are 7,000 diagnoses in this country every year for people who are HIV positive, which is not a good place for any of them to be, I know. But 60% of them are not British nationals. You can come into Britain from anywhere in the world and get diagnosed with HIV and get the retroviral drugs that cost up to £25,000 per year per patient.
Nicola Sturgeon. When somebody is diagnosed with a dreadful illness, my instinct is to view them as a human being, not consider what country they come from.
Then there was the Brexit Party, with the aim of trying to make sure there was a harder Brexit as possible.
Nigel Farage claims his party has no place for people with extreme views.
UKIP and the Brexit Party are very different, and I don't think that Middle England, decent people, want to vote for a political party that is linked to extremism, violence, criminal records and thuggery.
Look at certain other countries who will not accept Muslims. They don't need a quarter of the prisons that we need. They're outbreeding this.
You're getting more of the blacks and all, the proper blacks from Somalia and all.
So have you got a mosque here?
Yeah, right round near me where I live. We tried to put a big pig's head in the concrete. We got over the fence. When they were doing the groundwork. And they had all the bouncers who do all the North East. We were doing the security for that mosque.
Yeah.
So when we got in, the caught us out because we were going to take a video with a pig's head under their concrete, let them finish it, let it all get built, and just send the video out and say, look, there you go, you've got a pig's head under your mosque there, so you'll have to get it all knocked down and redone again, or we'll just leave it because it's desecrated ground, innit?
But the Turks are the biggest heroin dealers in the country.
How have you kept it away from the Brexit Party then?
No, they know.
Oh, they do know?
They've had to do police checks.
Yeah.
As long as I haven't been to jail.
Right.
Apparently it's been fine.
To Gordon Parkin.
Exactly.
I am the assistant manager for the North East region.
He's a senior figure in the campaign team, But did the party vetting system miss him too?
Well, I remember you said you was involved with UKIP
I
before.
was for 15, 16 years, but I've been retired 3 months. And then they said, God, Gordon, come back with us, come back with us. I thought,
Yeah.
Christ, I'll come and help you out.
Gordon Parkin is no stranger to Nigel Farage or Richard Tice. He's no Brexit Party bit part player. But 4.5 years ago, he was investigated by UKIP for sharing far-right posts. Shared by accident, he insisted, and then deleted.
I believe in what Tom Robson says, to be quite frankly. Nobody has got the balls to stand up and tell it as it is.
But just last week, Nigel Farage was insisting his party doesn't have a problem.
Any attempt that gets made to try and paint the Brexit Party into being a right-wing political party that would harbour anybody with extreme views is completely and utterly wrong.
And that leads us into the present day with Reform, which seems to be using a Jimmy Savile Fix-It sign as part of the logo. Don't understand that, but that is not what we're going to concentrate on. Have a listen to all of these stories involving Reform candidates, brought to you through a group called Hope Not Hate. There's Mark Broadhurst from Hatfield Council, who shared a meme praising Hitler and blaming Muslims. There's Isaiah Joseph, who had posted that Bradford is not a good place and insinuated it was down to the Muslim population. Stephen Biggs suggesting that you need a nuclear bomb for, I suppose, some sort of genocide. Philip Roberts of Horncastle and Kills, who seems to be talking about going as far back as the Crusades, where we've been kicking the crap out of each other for over 1,000 years. And Paul Harrison saying yes to the call that all mosques be demolished in Britain. Then there's Joseph Bohm running in Leicestershire, who Reform only retweeted about pretty much 2 days after the article was released by Hope Not Hate. According to Hope Not Hate, there's claims that Joseph was a fan of Andrew Tate and that he retweeted positively on other posts referring to the greatness of Andrew. Several of the candidates have also shown interest and liking of Tommy Robinson, and of course, where would any Nigel Farage party be without people who want to be unvaccinated and believing in the conspiracies of vaccines? At present, I'm completely unaware of anything that Reform is doing about all these allegations made by Hope Not Hate, and frankly, the mainstream media, other than maybe the BBC and a few other outlets, have pretty much failed to deal with any of this. Some of these things that they've said are so heinous and outrageous, it's beyond belief, and some would clearly be criminal acts if they were prosecuted by police. Changing the name doesn't change the nature. New badge, same hate. Same fruitcakes, loonies and racists gathering under the next flag. The question is, if the same kind of people keep showing up, is it still an accident, or is it the whole point? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Once again, if you got this far in the video, I must have done something right, so please hit that like and subscribe button. To all my Patreon and YouTube subscribers, thank you so much for all your support. I couldn't keep going without you. Once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.